So, how will President-elect Donald Trump handle relations with Cuba once he's sworn in 53 days? That is the question, excuse me, minds after Fidel Castro's death over the weekend. Trump has been critical of President Obama lifting the embargo with Cuba, so what would he do differently? Let's discuss it with CNN political commentator and former South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer. He met with Castro on a trip to Cuba in 2003. Also joining us is Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo, who is Cuban American. Gentlemen, it's great to have you because you both have personal experiences with Castro and Cuba. So, Andre, let me start with you. What was that trip like to Cuba in 2003 and your meeting with Fidel Castro, and what were you hoping to get out of it?
Well, it was definitely eye-opening to see how oppressed those people are, to watch the people in line just to get a loaf of bread. It was really moving as a young man. I went down there as a 33-year-old, new to the whole process, and meeting with him for 4 hours and trying to engage in discussion. He got very aggravated with me when I talked about allowing Americans to come down and open businesses, allowing Americans to own real estate, and what he said was going to be a 30-minute meeting went on for about 4 hours. I don't think he was used to having somebody challenge him. So it was interesting, but this is a real opportunity for the American people and for the Cuban people to come together. If we want to try to bargain now, I think we've got to reverse what President Obama's done and take this opportunity to say, look, we're willing to work with you, but things are going to have to change.
Congressman, your parents are Cuban exiles. How has that colored your impression of the way forward here?
Well, there's not a lot of mourning going on in Miami, to say the least. People here feel relieved. This is where the victims of Castro's dictatorship, this is where many of them live. My family is just one of hundreds of thousands of families who live here in South Florida and who have in some way been hurt by the Castro government. I was encouraged by the president-elect's statement. It's obvious that he's approaching this relationship with Cuba with clear eyes. It's obvious that he knows the nature of the Castro regime. He said the truth about who Fidel Castro was and the horrific crimes that he perpetrated, not just against the Cuban people, but also against many Americans. And it was a sharp contrast to President Obama's statement and to President Obama's policies over the last 2 years, where it's been one unilateral concession after another to a government that is an enemy of the United States, that still opposes our interests throughout the world, that is responsible for the death of American citizens. So I think we're going to see a different approach starting on January 20th.
Let's talk about that different approach, Andre. What do you want to see President-elect Trump do differently and try to get out of this relationship with Cuba?
Well, right off the bat, they need to release political prisoners. Be great if they'd apologize for some of the atrocities they've done, allow international business. There's a multitude of things we can do, and to have a neighbor that we aren't working with is a missed opportunity. But they're going to have to give some concessions before we just roll out the red carpet for them. In my opinion, I'm glad to see President-elect Trump talking in that type of tone.
Congressman, I want to put up for our viewers and you the two condolence messages, basically, or at least announcements of death. President Obama versus President-elect Trump and how they responded to Fidel Castro's death, because there is sort of a stark difference here. So let me put up first President Obama's. He says, "We offer condolences to Fidel Castro's family, and our thoughts and prayers are with the Cuban people." Donald Trump took a different tact. He said, "Though the tragedies, deaths, and pain caused by Fidel Castro cannot be erased, our administration will do what it can to ensure the Cuban people can finally begin their journey toward prosperity and liberty." Congressman, what did you think of the difference in those two?
I think President Obama owes an apology to the American people, not just to Cuban Americans who have felt so much of this pain, but I remind people, Fidel Castro is the man who had nuclear missiles installed in Cuba and pointed to the United States. He brought the world to the brink of a nuclear war. And for the president to say, also in that statement, he said, history will judge Fidel Castro. We don't have to wait. We know that this man was a tyrant. He was a murderer. He worked against the United States every single day of his life when he was in power. And you look at the contrast to the president-elect, who is being honest. And by the way, that helps explain why this last election went the way it went. The American people want to be told the truth. The American people are sick and tired of this political speak, this lukewarmness, lack of honesty. And again, I just think January 20th, we're going to be opening up a new chapter in U.S.-Cuba relations. The Cuban government is going to be held accountable. American interests are going to be put first. We're going to put the interests of the oppressed Cuban people first. And hopefully, we will get the kind of change we all want in Cuba, a change that, of course, will lead to many opportunities, including business opportunities in the future. But as long as Cuba remains a closed society, an oppressive, repressive government that opposes American interests, it's going to be very hard to get there. We need to put the pressure on them.
So, Andre, what do you think about diplomatic relations? What do you think about the embassy there in Cuba that is reopened? Is it too soon?
Well, I think that there are folks like the representative on the show here, Mel Martinez, Senator Rubio, folks that are much more knowledgeable than I. But we've got to have some feedback, with positive feedback from their government. For too long, people have been oppressed, people have been jailed that spoke out. We've got to have a system where they show us in good faith they want to work with us. And hopefully with the, I'm a opportunist and a continually looking for a new way to hopefully find better relations. And hopefully with Fidel's passing, that government will look and say, this part of the regime is gone and we want to try to change our ways. I don't know that they will, but I'm hoping that. And with the tone that Donald Trump has set, that sets the stage for at least some type of understanding and discussions to start.
Yeah, very interesting to see what happens over the next days. Andre Bauer, Congressman Curbelo, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's get to Chris.